Welcome. Two great posts today. One, where do you find benchmarks and how do you use them? And two, startup failures are skyrocketing. What does that mean for both startups and mid-sized companies? We'll get into both of those. Okay, let's kick things off with Ray Rike's post, and he lays out what are the best benchmark reports from his perspective. And has some insights on how to use them effectively. And so let's look at some of these public company benchmarks, which are interesting to me, but I'm going to skip over those because most of our clients are not public. And so I think lessons learned from public company benchmarks are not as effective. So moving down to private company benchmark. Benchmark annual SaaS performance metrics benchmark report. Research conducted in partnership with leading SaaS companies, including Sage, Maxio, Mosaic, Baker Tilly, the SaaS CFO, and many more. Sample of about 1,000. And now this is Ray's company, and it's got some really good data. So definitely check that one out. Battery Ventures, which I've not looked at before. Bessemer, I have seen this before. State of the Cloud. He says now they have a pivot to the AI cloud. Iconic state of GTM benchmark. I just took a look at this a couple of days ago. It might have been Ray who actually posted about it. One of the go-to reports for me on go-to-market metrics. So be cautious on how you use the benchmarks in this report, as many only show the top quartile and may be biased in the pedigree of the companies included. KeyBank Capital Markets, OpenView benchmarks, reports, and this is Kyle Poyer and his team, and this is a gold standard, as Ray says, for product-led growth and usage-based pricing benchmarks. Definitely check those out. Kyle's got some great data, and if you're not following him on LinkedIn, you definitely should. But then Ray gets into some cautions on using benchmark reports. If the report does not include company profile, specific filter attributes like company size, ACV, customer segments, they are less valuable. If population N is less than 200 to 250, the resultant benchmarks will have a higher error of margin and reduced statistical significance. Even more important when looking at on a cohort or segment basis. VC-generated reports that only include their portfolio companies will typically be of high quality, use common metric formulas, but can include selection bias based upon the pedigree of their portfolio. The initial A16Z benchmarks are a case in point. And then finally, benchmarks are not absolutes. They are a high-level guide to industry averages or 25th percentile, median, 75th percentiles, often without context. And then finally, happy belated birthday to Ray. And then in the comments, also Randy Wooten, who's CEO at Maxio, mentions Maxio's quarterly growth index report. And Maxio has some great data. He's saying they have over 2,000 companies within it. And so I think benchmark, there's a lot of, I've seen a number of posts out there about that companies should not be using benchmarks. My take, though, is that benchmarks can be a very valuable resource. They can help you quickly identify and prioritize what you should be working on. I mean, when you're working, you're only seeing what you're working on. It's important to have an understanding of what else is out there because it will tell you what the opportunity could be. And it will help you identify problem areas. Now, I'm not saying this should be your sole guide or even your primary guide to what you're working on. But if you go through and see that you're a SaaS company and your lead conversion rates are 0.5%, and you look at one of these benchmark reports and their lead conversion rates are 10%, well, that's something that needs to be researched. I mean, you need to go look at that. And that's just a quick way to identify that there's something different. I'm not saying that's the answer, but it does help you identify that there's something different. Or if you go through and see that, some of these companies have, millions of users and you're at 10,000, it will help you go see and what are they doing to get these millions of users? Is that an opportunity for you to drive growth and do what they're doing? And that, again, it helps you quickly identify. I mean, this, like I said, this shouldn't be your only resource, your only guide or your primary guide. But it definitely will help you identify quickly which things that your company should be working on. I do think Ray raises a very important point, though, is that you need to make sure that you're looking at companies that are similar in a similar industry or similar size of yours, to make sure that the data is meaningful. You can, and not just those things, but you also want to make sure that you're looking at, you at least understand how they're doing their marketing. Because if they're a product-led growth company and your sales-led growth, like the data is just not going to be as meaningful. Now, maybe there's an opportunity for you to take a look at product-led growth and say, this is an opportunity for us to grow via this channel, but you comparing benchmarks won't be meaningful. And so you have to be very careful about that. Again, the top priority is obviously like thinking about what your user is trying to accomplish and putting together marketing around that, building out your brand. But these benchmarks will help you quickly identify and prioritize what things you should be working on. The next post I want to take a look at is this post from Linas Beliūnas. And he's got a ton of followers, talks a lot about the startup space. And he says, wild, the rate at which US startups are going bust is 7x higher than in 2019, but it's actually not bad. Here's why. He says, there's been an explosion in the number of startups over the past decade, so failure is inevitable. In fact, this might only accelerate thanks to AI and other tech tools. But that's the reality of entrepreneurship. It's the natural evolution of startups and venture. But this is not a failure rate. Experiment, fail, close shop, start over, keep building. So he presents this chart here, which shows startup failures. The title is Startup Failures Have Surged by More Than 60% in the past year. And it's the annual failure rate. And I'm not sure actually what this chart is showing, if I'm going to be honest, because the failure rate looks like it's at like 60% maybe in 2020. In 2024, the failure rate, if this is really a rate, is 250%. So more companies are failing than are getting started. I mean, there's a way that would be true, but that seems surprising to me. So I'm not exactly sure what this chart is showing, but failures are up. And so my take on this is twofold. One is I know he says this is not necessarily bad, but I don't like it. I think startups are either getting really bad advice on what to do or failing to take good advice, because it doesn't need to be this way. See, I don't like this because I hate to see these companies fail when it's unnecessary. And really it's wasteful. It's a waste of time, of people's time, a waste of resources, and a waste of emotion. I mean, people put a lot of emotion. They put a lot of effort into these startups, and to see them fail, especially unnecessarily, like there is a way to do a startup correctly. And so this is not necessary. So I don't like to see this. I would like, I would like to see the failure rate not skyrocket, even if there are more failures. But on the flip side, if you're a mid-sized brand, I mean, the competition is just increasing. I mean, that's clear. The number of startups is increasing. They're coming after you. And so you need to think about what you need to do as a mid-sized company to defend your position and continue to grow. And obviously investing in brand is absolutely going to be critical. You need to make sure that people are familiar with who your company is. And then you also need to make sure that you're doing something great. You have to do something that's good enough that people won't switch away from you. So instead of, I've talked about before, instead of saying, look, we're just going to match feature parity with the leader in the space, make sure that you're focused on delivering something that's world-class, best in class, that cannot be easily replicated, so that people will not switch away from you because they realize that you're the best and they need it. So that's really important here as a mid-size brand, is to, in response to all this competition, is to make sure that you're building out your brand and that you're doing something exceptional so that people will not switch away from. Okay, two things to keep in mind for today. One, Ray Rike provides where you can find benchmarks for your company. But two, make sure you're using benchmarks the correct way. Make sure you're looking to see that the benchmarks apply to your company. And two, use them to identify and prioritize. Don't let it be your ultimate guide, your primary guide to what you're trying to accomplish from a marketing perspective. And two, startup failure rates are through the roof. They're skyrocketing recently. What does this mean? For startups, you're either getting bad advice or you're not following good advice. It doesn't need to be this way. Make sure you're finding good advice on how to drive growth, how to start up your business. And two, for mid-sized brands, it means the competition is out there. They're coming for you. You have to invest in your brand, and you have to make sure you're doing something great so your customers won't switch away from you.